Our Prophet said, hadith is in Muslim Imam Ahmad, that most of his followers will be from the Yahud. Now, this leads us to a very interesting issue and tangent. We had mentioned last week, that the Christian belief is very similar to our belief, especially the evangelicals, that Jesus is the Messiah and he shall come back towards the end of times, that there shall be a false Messiah, the Antichrist, and that Christ and Antichrist will fight it out, and that Christ will win over the Antichrist in the great Armageddon. In this rough skeleton, we are the same. No issues. Now, with the devil's in the detail, and they have a lot of other ikhtilafat, but in this skeleton, evangelicals, Baptists, Muslims, we all believe the same thing. Of course, there are many differences of them. We do not have this as an explicit mention, but they do. And that is that this will only happen when the Bani Israel are gathered in the Holy Land. Okay, this is the belief of evangelicals, that Jesus will only come back when all of the Bani Israel are gathered in the Holy Land. And therefore, because they want to see their Lord and Savior, they are eager to bring the Bani Israel to the Holy Land. Are you guys following? I'm being وَالْلَبِيبُ بِالْإِشَارَةِ يَفْهَمُ. I'm being, so they want the people of that faith tradition to go to that land. And it is because of this that some of the most hardcore Zionists are not people of the Jewish faith. They are evangelicals. Because it is their aqeedah. It is their aqeedah that with the return of the promised people to the promised land, their Savior will come back. So they want to expedite that. Now, ironically, they believe when the Savior comes, one of the first things he's going to do is to get rid of those who didn't believe in him. And primarily, according to their aqeedah, the people who tried to kill him, or actually succeeded in killing, because they believe they succeeded. Now, this is the irony of ironies. Think about it. I need you to understand my point here. This group wants to expedite and support the Bani Israel to go to this land with the aqeedah that they will all be destroyed in that land. You understand this? They are ardent Zionists, and they have no love for the people whom they are helping. On the contrary, their aqeedah is that the very people they're helping, you understand this point, right? Wallahi, ajab al-ujab, ajib. How can the other group accept their aid knowing that this group wants us dead? And you know, my mind was perplexed, and I actually, you know, I'm an interfaith person, I'm involved in whatnot. I had a friendship with one of the rabbis of Memphis, and we would go out to lunch every, few weeks and whatnot. It's good to have interfaith and friendship, and we got to a very frank point. So I actually asked him, I said, aren't you embarrassed to accept help from people who think that helping you will eventually cause you to Yani, isn't there some haya sharam, some dignity, some izzah? Like, the very people who want to get rid of you, they're helping you in the aqeedah that you will be gotten rid of. And he just smirked. He goes, well, that's their belief. If they want to throw money and power at us, then, we don't believe it's going to happen. It's their, basically, he said in a nutshell, if they're foolish enough to believe it, that's their business. We're going to still accept their power and help. So we have to understand this point, O Muslims. The people who are supporting this guy in the White House, right? This whole move to Jerusalem, the capital, whatnot, this is all a tactical decision. He might be a blabbering idiot, but he is a tactical blabbering idiot. He knows what he's doing. He is feeding his base. Another tangent here, subhanAllah. He is feeding his base. He's giving them the scraps from the table. Why is he doing this? He knows his base is evangelical. He knows these people, they want him, and so they feed him this stuff to do what? Because they want this land to be the promised land for the promised people, so that the Messiah comes and gets rid of these very people to establish heaven on earth and whatnot, and the final judgment day. All of this is going to happen. So this is the aqidah of the evangelicals. By the way, Catholics are different. Please, Muslims, educate yourselves. Don't be kindergarten level in your education and just extrapolate. Every Christian group is different. Every firqa is different. Learn your firq if you want to get involved in this issue. Otherwise, do not speak. Speak with knowledge or remain silent. Various groups have different aqidas. The Mormons are different. They have their own beliefs. The Seventh-day Adventists are totally different in this regard. And of course the Evangelicals, which is of course the default in this state, the Baptists and whatnot, these are the ones that we're talking about now. And their aqidah is in some ways very similar to ours, in some ways it's different. So that's the Yahud. That's the Christians. How about the Yahud? How about the Yahud? What is their belief in the Messiah? And why is our Prophet ﷺ saying that the majority of the followers of Dajjal will be from that group? Well, in Jewish eschatology, the term Messiah, it refers specifically, they do have this aqidah, and it refers to a future king from the line of David. Okay? So, mainstream Jewish belief is that there will be a person from the line of David, from the descendants of Dawood, who will be a king, and he will be anointed, Masih. He will be anointed with holy oil, and he will bring in the Messianic age. He will bring in the end of times. So, the Masih in their aqidah is called the King Masih, Malach Mashiach, Malach Mashiach, the King Messiah. Because for them, the Messiah is a political figure, not a religious reformer. Okay? For them it was, the Messiah is a one of power and politics, and not somebody who comes tazkiyatun nafs, and Isa is coming and telling them, ubashirukum, and giving you glad tidings. The bushra is the evangelion, or the evangelical, the Injil, evangelical. By the way, evangelical and Injil, the same term. Injil is Injil, the good tidings. The evangelical, that's where it comes from. So the Messiah in Jewish folklore is a king from the line of Dawood, who will bring about the restoration of the status of the Israelites and reconstruct the temple of Israel. Okay? So they do believe in the Messiah as a political figure, and who will bring back the kingdom of who? Of Dawood. And this has been a mainstream of ancient, medieval, and even some modern Jewish movements, as we're going to come to right now. And that is why, dear Muslims, when the Messiah Isa came and he began preaching to the Bani Israel, and he claimed he was the Messiah, the Yahud did not care about a Messiah that's a spiritual reformer. They wanted a Messiah who is what? Who is a king. And so when they found out that this person is not a king, they went and complained to the king, to the Roman emperor, and they said, we have a man who is claiming to be the king of the Israelites. Did Isa claim to be king? Hello, did Isa claim to be king? Why did the Yahud say he's claiming to be king? Are you guys following this? Because he claimed to be the Messiah, and in the eyes of the Yahud, the Messiah is who? The king. And so what happened with Pontius Pilate, what happened with them happened, and they said, oh, this is a political agitator. They would not have cared if Jesus said he's a religious reformer. They didn't care. What is there to do with a religious reformer? But they did worry that he's claiming to be a king. They don't want any political trouble. And that's why what happened. And so they then went to arrest him. And then what happened, we will talk maybe in another lecture. What do we Muslims believe, and what are the various theories out there? But anyway, now you understand that issue. Now the issue we need to come back to is that belief in the advent of the Messiah was a mainstream of Jewish theology, and for them the Messiah will bring back the power and the izzah of the kingdom of David that used to be. And therefore, when the single greatest theologian of Jewish law and Jewish theology, there is only one that is Shaykhul Islam amongst them. There is one amongst them in all of their history that they consider to be the greatest Jewish mind, and that is the Jewish theologian, the most famous in the history of Judaism. Anybody? Yes, very good, but who? Oh Muslims, you should know this name because he was an Arab, meaning he spoke Arabic, that's what I mean. He lived in the lands of Muslims. He spoke Arabic more fluently than any language. He wrote in Arabic. And, totally different tangent, why am I going to these tangents? There is a theory that for a period of his life he was a Muslim because he studied in a madrasa, he memorized portions of the Quran, he studied fiqh and aqidah in the Islamic tradition, because back in those days all universities were run by Muslims. Back in those days, you know, if you go to university here, right, you go to UTD or SMU or something, they tell you you must take American history, you must take political science, these are the required courses, right? You cannot graduate in this country without taking these courses, right? Well, once upon a time, if you wanted to go to any university and study engineering or medicine or optics, you would have to study Fiqh 101, basics of Sharia. Okay, you have to study tafsir of the Quran. I'm not joking. This is exactly what needed to be done. Okay, that was so Musa ibn Maimonides, you should know the name. Maimonides, memorize this name. This is the single greatest intellectual of Jewish history completely. They call him the chief rabbi, Rambam, the chief rabbi. He was the greatest rabbi in the history of Judaism. He codified Jewish law. The Jewish law that he codified is basically after he studied Islamic Sharia. Now he's writing a book of fiqh. Okay, and he is the first and most important Jewish figure to write a book of aqidah, the book of theology. He wrote a book of theology and he summarized it in 13 points, and he called it the 13 principles of Iman. 13 principles of Iman. Why did he summarize aqidah? Because he studied aqidah from the Muslims, and now he wants to do the same for the Jewish faith. And so Jewish aqidah, when it comes to many things, is actually coming from the philosophy of Ibn Rushd, Averroes, and others, because Musa ibn Maimonides and Averroes were basically coming from the same philosophical strand. Anyway, back to our topic. What am I talking about? What am I talking about, guys? What's the topic? What the Yahud believe about what? Exactly. Not about the Dajjal. You're jumping the gun. The Yahud believe about what? Masih. Be careful. The Masih, the Malach Mashiach, the king of the Messiah. So, Musa ibn Maimonides, wrote a book called the 13 Principles of Faith. By the way, you can look it up, it's translated into English. And each principle begins with the phrase, Ani ma'min, ana mu'min, ana mu'min, ana mu'min, ani ma'min in Hebrew. Ana mu'min, this, I believe in this, I believe in this, I believe in this. The 12th principle of these 13, and I quote from the translation, my Hebrew is too weak to actually read it to you, I'm not going to embarrass you with that, but I quote from the translation, I believe with full faith, ani ma'min, ana mu'min, in the coming of the Messiah. This is in the aqidah of Maimonides, which is the standard aqidah of the Jewish peoples up until our times. He is the only one who has codified to that level, aqidah and fiqh. I believe with full faith, yaqeen, certainty in the coming of the Messiah. And even though he delays, with all that delay, I eagerly await his arrival, every day anticipating his arrival. This is the aqidah of Maimonides that the Yahud would memorize, that they still believe to this day. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we should all be aware that there are 3 strands, right, of Judaism in our times. They are, number 1, which one? Orthodox. Number 2, conservative. Number 3, reform. There are others, reconstructions, but for ours, let's just keep with these 3. And the bulk of them in our times are reform. Okay? Actually, another tangent, but again, this is stuff you should be aware of. This is something interesting. Around 20, 30 years ago, the Orthodox were so minuscule that the assumption was they would disappear. It would be gone, especially in the 70s. But there has been a massive revival, and more Yahud are joining the Orthodox even if their parents were not Orthodox. And so the Orthodox movement has swelled in ranks. And I don't know the latest statistics, but I think maybe up to 15%, which is a big number compared to what it was in the 70s. 15%, like, 1 out of 8 is an Orthodox, okay? And one of the reasons, by the way, again, all of this is a tangent, but inshallah it is beneficial to us as Muslims, because we need to learn from the good and the bad. We need to see history, we need to learn what's going on. The fact of the matter is, why is there a return to Orthodoxy? Frankly, because when you have a religion whose values become so watered down that they don't stand for anything, the very people say, what is this? It's not a religion anymore. And they will go back to an actual religion. And this is a big warning to those amongst the Muslim community who are flirting with progressive Islam. When Islam becomes the flavor of the month, then you have no Islam left. Then what is the purpose of being a Muslim? When the halal becomes what is politically correct, and the haram becomes what is politically incorrect, and you have no backbone to stand on, and you think you are preserving your faith, in reality you are losing it. Your children will not have any faith. What do you have left anymore? Our faith is not based upon the whims of society around us. We have the Quran, we have our Sharia, we have the Wahy from Allah. Now I'm not saying we have to be intransigent. No. Our ulama, especially our forward-thinking ulama, have to navigate the flow. Where there's allowance, we will take it. But where there is none, we will not take it. Where there's a red line, we do not go that area. So that's a point we learn. In the 1960s, 70s, there was a massive, as I said, almost everybody is going reform. Their own children began rejecting it. And they said, what is this? There's nothing there. There is no, to be reformed, you can be atheist. You can deny God. There's no Sharia. You can eat pork and whatnot. And there's like, what is left of my Jewishness? That they will say, what is left if there's nothing? So there's going back to the asl. And the asl is Orthodox. That is the hardcore literalism. Now, within Orthodox, there are many strands. And of course, you have the Hasidic Orthodox. You are all familiar with the Hasidic, H-A-S-I-D-H, the Hasidic. And the Hasidic in particular is a strand of Orthodox. They have a very strong and passionate belief about the coming of the Messiah, that is very imminent, just about to appear. And they believe, and this is important again, that the more pious they are, the more quickly the Messiah will come. And that explains their fervousness. That explains their literalism. The more pious they are, so the more faithful they are, the faster will come the Messiah, right? And so they are very, very hardcore about this. And within Hasidism, so this is, I'm teaching you the firaq within Orthodox Judaism, okay? By the way, Reform does not believe in the Messiah, it's completely, obviously, right? Reform doesn't believe. Conservatives, mushkila with them is they don't really have la ilaha ula wa la ilaha ula mudabdabin. They don't have, the conservatives, they don't really have a platform per se, because at least with the Orthodox, they're hardcore. Like everything is all the way, right? The Reform, nothing, throw everything out the window. The conservatives, they don't really have a platform. Some here, some there. How do you decide? Each conservative strand has its own issue. So, amongst the conservatives, some of them believe in the Messiah, some of them don't. Amongst the Orthodox, they all believe in the Messiah. Is that clear? Right? That's why they're still Orthodox. They believe in the coming of the Messiah. The Hasidics are of the most Messianic amongst them, and within Hasidism, there is the most prominent stand of Hasidism is called the Chabad, C-H-A-B-D, the Chabad movement, the Chabad, the Chabad movement. The Chabad movement in particular is the most Messianic, so much so, one of the greatest Jewish figures of our times, an American born in Russia, migrated after Germany coming here. He died in 1994. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, one of the most famous rabbis, presidents from what is it, I even forgot who is it, Ford or whatever onwards, they would have regular, he was like America's rabbi of the Orthodox community. Of course, he's passed away 1994. His followers began to claim that that person is the Messiah. Like that's how imminent it is. Still to this day, some of his followers believe that the rabbi did not die, that he is still alive in hiding, which sounds similar to other groups, which is why similarities are made between that group and this group, but that is again besides this point. So the point being, where am I heading with all of this? Belief in false Messiah is not false Messiah, scrap that. Belief in Messiah is common amongst the Yahud. Therefore, do you think it is surprising when towards the end of time somebody with power comes and claims to be the Messiah, and he is from that background? Is it surprising that lots of people will then accept that claim? I need interaction, guys. Huh? It makes sense. You now understand why our Prophet ﷺ said that many of his followers will be of that group. Now, important point. Our Prophet ﷺ did not say many of that group will be his followers. Big difference. It is possible that many of that group, many of the Jews, will recognize truth and falsehood. It is possible. But from those who choose to follow him, many will be from that background. You understand the difference, right? Large circle, Venn diagram, small circle, get the point. Anyway, interesting tangent, which is very interesting. This is in the notes, it's not a tangent off the top of my head. These tangents get me into a lot of trouble, especially for this topic. I have to be very precise what I say. Another very interesting tangent, which is relevant to us, and it is in my notes. One of the most famous claims of Jewish Messianic fame was a person born and raised and died in Muslim lands, spoke Arabic fluently. And he was a member of the Ottoman peoples, meaning a citizen, if you like, even though the concept of citizenship is modern. But and this is the famous rabbi known as Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was born in Ottoman lands in the 16th, 17th century, 16 something. He died in, don't quote me, 17th century. And Shabtai Tzvi was a famous rabbi who began to have a larger and larger following and eventually claimed to be the Messiah. And his followers increased, and he began demanding more and more things. A lot of problems happened. He's a very interesting figure. He intermingled with European kings and with the Sultan Mehmed IV, the famous Ottoman Sultan, until finally his demands became so ludicrous and political, and making a long story short, but he began to be political. And when he began to be political, the Sultan imprisoned him. And eventually his followers clamored and whatnot, so the Sultan decided to execute Shabtai Tzvi. And he called him to his palace, and he said, "Your penalty is death, but I shall forgive you if you convert to Islam." Now, I'm not arguing that was good or bad, I'm just telling you what happened. Whether that was good or not, it's not my business. That's what the Sultan Mehmed IV decided. If you convert to Islam, you are forgiven. Faced between these, Shabtai Tzvi decided to convert to Islam, which caused a great crisis amongst his followers. Because if he's the Messiah, what are you going to do now, right? It caused a huge crisis. He had thousands of followers, and they all thought that he's going to be the Messiah, bring the kingdom of David back, this and that. And lo and behold, he embraces the Shahada in public, he takes off the turban of the Yahud, and he wears a big Ottoman turban. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. In those days, your clothing would tell you apart. He had the clothing of a rabbi. And in the presence of the Sultan, he took off his rabbi cloak and he wore the Ottoman, I'm not joking, it's not a joke, he wore the Ottoman turban and he said the Shahada and he said he's a Muslim. What are his followers going to do? Massive chaos, confusion. Some of them I think the majority, ended up either saying this is a ruse or a tactic, or converting with him. A small group left him. So this turned out to be one of the most bizarre conversions in Islamic history, because what happened was his followers, in fact he himself, became half Jew, half Muslim. He observed Ramadan, but he observed the Sabbath as well. He read some Quran, but he also read the Hebrew. So he had this new thing that came about. And his followers were called Donme. Donme, which was a derogatory term by the Ottomans, by the Muslims of the time. Donme, there is no English equivalent. There's no English equivalent. It means convert, but not with a positive connotation, like a traitor convert. Like there is no English word. A convert, but not like a positive convert. You've turned your back and left, and you've come, but yeah, we're not, like a big question mark, that type. This is the term that who gave them? The Muslims of the time. They weren't happy with this guy and his followers. Too weird. Eventually, the Sultan, of course, by the way, initially was very happy, gave him a massive check here, massive money, you became a Muslim, good. Eventually it turned out he's still observing Jewish rituals and customs, so he lost all favor, he was exiled, he died in exile. His followers, who are now outwardly Muslim, inwardly continue to be what are called crypto-Jews, okay? And their numbers increased, and they are still around in Turkey, the Donme. They're still around in Turkey. Now, to make the plot worse, to make the soup thick here, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. We Muslims love conspiracy theories. And the problem with conspiracy theories is they're so ludicrous, except for the ones that are true. This is the problem. And you can't really tell the true from the falsehood until Allahu A'lam. So, conspiracy theories are a problem. Nonetheless, I'm narrating the conspiracies, I'm not endorsing them, please, okay? So when Fox News comes and misquotes me those 10 seconds, please go back to this clip that I'm saying here right now, that I'm simply narrating so that you should be aware. I am not endorsing the conspiracy theories at all. The conspiracy theories that were started from that time frame, and they lasted up until today, they are there. The religious Muslims of the Ottoman lands said these people are Zanadiqa. What are Zanadiqa? Crypto-Muslims who want to destroy Islam. They're not real, they want to harm Islam. And they hate Islam, but they pretend to be Muslim. And the Donme became rich and powerful in a number of cities, in particular the one city where Shabtai Tzvi died. And at the turn of the century, 100 years ago, now it is, and I want to give a part 2 to that. Inshallah, make dua, Allah gives me time and whatnot. It's just a matter of time and preparing the lecture and slides, but it's you need to know this date. Around this time, a little bit before and after, but around this time, a group called the Young Turks were formed. And the Young Turks were a very, very secular, anti-religious groups of Turks who were keen on abolishing the Khilafah and bringing about a Turkey that was secular in nature. Now, what I'm about to tell you is true. Many of the leaders of this movement were from, in particular, a very, very dashing yet cruel, intellectual yet heartless man later called Mustafa Kemal, later called Ataturk. Ataturk is from the Donme, this is a fact. Now you go figure what is conspiracy and what is history. You go figure what is true and what is false. I'm simply telling you the perception about the motives of the Donme. And then I will tell you factually, Ataturk hated Islam. Ataturk mocked Islam. He was not a believer in Islam at all. And it's very clear that he considered Islam to be something that caused his people and nations to be backward. And if he wanted to, if he was able to, he would ban the religion. He did enough damage to the religion as it is. As you know, he shut down the madrasas, he abolished the khilafah, he abolished the Grand Mufti, role of the Grand Mufti, he made the court system secular, got rid of all of the Sharia, he made the Quran to be recited in Turkish during the Salah. The Adhan was recited in Turkish, not in Arabic anymore. Instead of Allahu Akbar, they said something in Turkish. That was his whole point, to make everything Turk. So, Ataturk is from the Donme. You understand where conspiracy theories come from. And not just him, but many of those who followed him. Do you understand how this is relevant to Dajjal? It's not coming out of there. Shabtai Tzvi claimed to be Messiah. And all of this then leads there. Anyway, so we have 5-6 minutes left, so I needed to mention one final thing. Okay? Now, I have saved one issue to the very end because it is highly, highly, highly sensitive. And that is a hadith that mentioned that towards the end of times, when the big Armageddon battle takes place, and there shall be Dajjal on one side and Isa on the other, that is the final Armageddon, the big one, that Isa will kill Dajjal. And then all of the followers of Dajjal will disperse, running for their lives. Many of them will be from that group. And they will try to save themselves by hiding. And the hadith mentions, this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, and there are versions of it in Bukhari, but it's Sahih Muslim primarily. The hadith mentions that at that time frame, the creation will side with the Muslims publicly. I shouldn't even just say Muslims, the supporters of Isa, because there will be Christians who will support Isa and believe in him, so they will become Muslim, right? And for all we know, there might be Yahud as well, who will choose at that time to be with the truth. The hadith don't mention that all of them will follow. It just says the majority of his followers will be from there. There's a difference between the two. So, the hadith mentions that every tree and every rock will say to the believer, come, there is that person behind. Come, and he is hiding. So that there is no use to hide. There's no use to hide anymore, because the creation of Allah will publicly humiliate and say, oh, he's hiding here, come and deal with this person. Except for the tree of Gharqad, that is a tree that will be quiet and not side with the Muslims. Now, every once in a while, some innocent khatib somewhere in the Western world gives a khutbah and he quotes this hadith. And memory jumps on him. You know what memory is? If you don't, then alhamdulillah for you. Or Fox News jumps on him, or Pamela Geller jumps on him and takes this small clip and goes viral with it and says, oh, this is an anti-Semite and he is calling for the destruction and he is Hitler version 2.73 and he is this and that. Bring him back again, right? So it becomes problematic to quote our own tradition because accusations of anti-Semitism come. And a few years ago, there was a University of California would host the MSA uploaded all of the books of hadith. Once upon a time, if you ever did a Google about hadith, the first one would be University of California. One of the MSA brothers, he uploaded all of the hadith collections, and it was a great resource. Obviously, these guys found it, and they found these ahadith in Sahih Muslim, and they said the university is anti-Semite, or it is hosting anti-Semites. It's hosting Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, right? So the university, it was a big scandal. The university had to get involved. The MSA had to edit and censor Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim had to cut a hadith if they wanted to host, and eventually the whole thing was pulled. There is no longer the hadith collection on their website. It's gone. It's gone. So this raises a very difficult topic. Are these hadith anti-Semitic? The response, I think, is very clear, and that is that first and foremost, as a matter of principle, as a matter of principle, these are traditions that are found in books authored 1,000 years ago, 1,200 years ago, books of hadith. Censorship doesn't make any sense. Are you, O people who are criticizing a book in the past, going to censor your own books and not teach them when they have misogyny, when they have race issues, when they have issues that might be politically incorrect? There is hardly a classical book, hardly, except that there are phrases or notions. Even Shakespeare has anti-Semitism. Read The Merchant of Venice. It is a purely anti-Semitic tract. Are you going to ban The Merchant of Venice? Are you going to stop it and strip it from being sold? Are you going to take it and make it non-available? The hypocrisy is ludicrous. You don't go back and sanitize history just because you don't like it. Even if you don't like it, it needs to be taught and explained and clarified. That is a matter of principle. That is what liberalism stands on. And when it comes to every faith other than Islam, they uphold it. When it comes to Islam, we see the double standards. That's the first point. Second point, the accusations of anti-Semitism need to be addressed head on. They need to be addressed head on. And we need to stop being so defensive. Let us be frank and honest here. Study history, O Muslims. Be educated. Anti-Semitism is a European phenomenon. It's not a Muslim phenomenon. It never existed in Muslim lands up until 1947. Anti-Semitism is something that began in Europe by Christians, and it was prevalent throughout their history, and it is still around to this day. Muslims were never anti-Semitic. Yes, it is true. Sharia has Ahli Kitab and Muslim. But Ahli Kitab includes who? Christians and Jews, and there's a slightly different Sharia. It's not anti-Semitism. Historically speaking, Muslims and Jews historically had much more in common, and they would always bind together against the one who would persecute them, and that is the Afranj, the Rum, the Franks, the Christians. Historically, Muslims and Jews had a much stronger relationship than Muslims and Christians and Jews and Christians. Historically speaking, without exaggeration, the greatest minds of the Jewish tradition, pre-modernity, all of them are found in Muslim lands. All of them. Starting from Baghdad and ancient Iran and Andalus and Egypt, you have the greatest minds coming, including Shabtai Tzvi in Ottoman lands. They could not do what they did in Muslim lands. They could not do it in Europe. Every time the Christians persecuted the Jews, Muslims opened their doors. The last time, 1492, when the Muslims were expelled from Granada, the Sultan of the Ottoman land said, "You Europeans are fools. The Jews are intelligent people. They're useful. Why don't you come?" And he invited all of them en masse to come and live in Muslim lands. And that is why throughout the Muslim world, throughout the world, the largest population of Jews before 1947 were in Muslim lands. In Yemen, in Iraq, in Morocco, in Egypt. These were where the Jews were. So this whole notion of Muslims being anti-Semite, by the very people who defended, by the very people who invented anti-Semitism, please Muslims, educate yourselves. Don't fall for all of this stuff, okay? Also, so that's historically speaking. Also, now let's get head on. Okay, so we talked about historically. Thirdly, let's get to the issue. Okay, well the hadith do mention, be honest here, the hadith do mention them. Jayyid, they do mention them. Let us realize these hadith, they are predictions, not prescriptions. Big difference. They're predictions, not prescriptions. They're telling you what's going to happen. They're not telling you it is allowed to do it. So, if you believe in these predictions, you believe that stones are going to talk. I believe they're going to talk. But the people who criticize us don't. If you don't believe 90% of it, then why are you believing the 10%? These are predictions of the end of times, of Armageddon, and what's going to happen, the apocalypse, the end of the world. If you believe that trees are going to talk, if you believe there's something called the Antichrist, if you believe there's something called the coming of Christ, well then, if you really believe that, fight on the side of truth, not on the side of evil. End of story. If you don't believe it, these hadith are not telling Muslims to do anything. It's describing what's going to happen towards the end of times. And therefore, if you choose the side of good and not the side of evil, you're not going to have this issue. So the bottom line, we don't have to worry about this charge of anti-Semitism. We need to educate ourselves and challenge it head on. These are not anti-Semitic hadith whatsoever. It's merely describing a battle towards the end of times, the forces of good, the forces of evil. Those who choose the forces of evil will have to suffer the consequences. Simple as that. You don't believe in this battle, then don't quote 10 phrases or 10 words and ignore the 100-word hadith. Don't quote that one phrase about the tree is going to say and ignore the whole context. That's being hypocritical. No scholar derives sharia from this. And again, to be brutally honest and blunt here, when the Holocaust was taking place in multiple places in the world, Muslims stood up to defend. Muslims stood up to help those that were being persecuted. This is a fact. The Muslims of France, the Muslims of Morocco, multiple places, they helped the Jewish people, and I have visited those places, Auschwitz and Dachau and others, and I will tell you honestly, and this is a reality that Allah knows, if I were alive at that time frame, I would have thought it is something that Allah will reward me if I were to protect these believers from that evil that was taking, believers in Allah overall, from that evil that is taking place. What happened afterwards, 1948 onwards, is not related to what happened before. If you were alive in 1940, you saw what is happening to this persecuted race, men, women and children being killed indiscriminately, it would be a part of our iman to protect the innocent from this evil force of Nazi Hitlerism. And that's something that I firmly believe, whether you agree or not, is besides the point. The point being, we need to challenge this notion of anti-Semitism. It is not anti-Semitic. These hadith are predicting the future, not prescribing law right now. Law tells us we protect minorities. That's what law tells us. Even in an ideal Islamic state, history proves that we protected those minorities. History proves that though they flourished, the Yahud flourished under the lands of Islam like they did not flourish until the advent of modernity in Europe. They were not allowed to do what they were in Muslim lands. So we deny this accusation of anti-Semitism from its complete, as we said, number one, the issue of hypocrisy and double standards. Number two, historically speaking, where did anti-Semitism come from? Number three, the Muslims and the Jews and the relationship. Number four, these hadith are descriptions of the future, predictions, and not what? Prescriptions, not prescribing what is to be done. So there is no anti-Semitism whatsoever, and we Muslims cannot be anti-Semites because our Prophet ﷺ was a Semite, Ibrahim was a Semite, the majority of Semites are Muslims. How can Muslims be anti-Semites? Yes, we can be anti-Zionists, and we are anti-Zionists, but we are not people who hate Jews and Christians. No. There's a difference between Judaism and Zionism. Muslims, be careful. Never criticize Judaism en masse unless it's theology. We can criticize aspects of theology. Jews, there are good and bad people amongst them. Christians, good and bad. Zionism as a movement, you have Christian Zionists, as we explained. You have Jewish Zionists. You have atheist Zionists. And we criticize Zionists, but not people of other faith traditions. They're Ahl Kitab. With that, time is up. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue about the nuzul of Isa and the issues of Isa, and then move on to the other major signs. Wa akhir da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.